Good evening, everyone. I am Rahul Agarwala. I am partner at Tax Mantra. And with me, I have my friend and colleague, Shomik Kumar Sen with me from our corporate law team. Welcome, Shomik.
Thanks, Rahul.
And welcome, everyone. So taking forward our webinar series, which we are doing almost every day, today we'll be talking about decoding the funding due diligence process. Shomik has a presentation for this. He'll be taking us through what are the things involved, what should be kept in mind, what should not be kept, what should be avoided. So we'll be taking all these up, and we are also live on Facebook. And anyone who has any comment, you can put in the comment section on our Facebook live page, or you can ping over here in the chat section. So would like to welcome you all once again, and Shomik, you can start the session.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. Thanks. The reason we are doing this webinar on due diligence is that there are some various misconceptions about the process, about what are the things that are involved, what is due diligence, and how the entire thing revolves. So in this webinar, we will try to cover all those points one by one, and I hope through this presentation, many of these conceptions will get clarified. So let's start this session. Now, at first, what we will try to understand is what is due diligence, right? Due diligence is nothing but checking the background reality of any company. So where we go through the details, the transactions, the informations about the business, and we try to understand what is the reality behind it. And not only we help to find the past, but we also analyze the present, and the entire process help us to forecast the future of any company. Hence, this no doubt helps not only the investors, but also the fund managers, the researchers, and for that matter, even the compliance professionals and entrepreneurs, because then they totally get the idea about how compliant their business is and what is the reality of their business currently. So why due diligence is done, as I said, it helps in understanding the essential element of a commercial transaction. What are the things that are involved? What are the risks, the liabilities? And it also helps to understand the potentiality of the transaction. So say, for example, you are thinking of investing in a company. Now, what is the potential that the company will give you? What are the risks attached to it? The compliance risk, the financial risk, the legal risk, and how good this transaction will be to you. This also helps to understand, and which we will discuss in detail in later slides, about how how the process would assist any organization to understand the nitty-gritties of their business and also their compliance system altogether. So not only this, it gives confidence to the entrepreneurs, but also the various stakeholders like investors, the associates, the employees, the other stakeholders in this business. Now, let's go one by one. At first, let us understand what is business and structural due diligence. So, our due diligence process involves various things. It doesn't only concentrate, there's a misconception that due diligence is only of three parts. That is technical due diligence, there is financial due diligence, and there is legal due diligence. Actually, if you go on reality, and people like us who works with the investors and startups alike, we know for a fact that this due diligence process involves various other things. So let's go one by one. The first being the business and structural due diligence. Now, in a business and structural due diligence, we try to uncover the operational weakness of a company. So say for example, how the business is growing, what are the business challenges that they are facing or they will face. We ask questions like what is the market scenario of your industry. We do due diligence about what is the aspects that the other firms are thinking about this company and how different are it to other firms. We try to understand the strategic rationale about the transaction and the commercial viability. We also try to understand the cap table structure. So, say for example, in a startup, what happens is that in when you do a business, there are various advisors involved, right? So whether these advisors are already in the cap table or not, and if there is any agreement attached to it, we try to analyze that. How this, if say for example, you have a ESOP pool of 20 employees and all of them are to be allotted shares, the cap table will get huge, right? So we try to understand the structure, the business structure, how the promoters are there, and especially in family businesses where there are various hierarchies, this structural due diligence plays a huge role. Coming to the financial due diligence, uh, when we do a financial due diligence, we do not only see the current financial numbers, but we try to go deep and try to find out the historical financial numbers. We see whether these entities are doing their all these accounting transaction as per the accounting standards, accounting policies. The reason behind is that if you do not do these transactions and do this accounting policy in a similar way, the proposed merger or proposed transactions can be at risk. So, say for example, in a merger and amalgamation, when when the holding company is trying to buy out the subsidiary entity, their accounting policies are completely different. So what will happen is that they will find different challenges while doing a consolidated account. So we try to analyze how is the accounting policies of the proposed subsidiary entity, and whether this can create hassles and complications. So potential liabilities, potential that can come in, what is the real value of the assets. So for example, many a times new startups make problems in depreciation, right? So we try to find out what is the reality of the assets and stuff. We try to understand the credibility of the facts, figures, and information provided. So we speak to the auditors, and there is we try to understand whether the actual value of the transaction is worth or not. So this is how a financial due diligence is done. And financial due diligence has also a taxation aspect to it. So if you understand, in India there are various taxations that is applicable. So there are GSTs, there are income tax, there are fee taxes, and there are other taxes as well, including excises and stuff for some sort of entities. Now, whether you are doing all those compliance in a rightful way. So, giving an example, when we recently when we did a due diligence, we found there were some issues in the GST filing. The GST return were not submitted in a proper way, and then we tried to highlight how things can go wrong and the value of the deal, how it affects the value of the deal in this regard. Now, we also understand the tax profile of the company, and we must also get that in a due diligence report, there are also suggestions. So, for example, when we do a due diligence, we try to see whether it is a DIPP registered startup. What will happen if it's a DIPP registered startup? If you are funding the deal, then the proposed company as well as the investors will get very less risk, will have a very less risk of getting IT notice under Angel Tax. So what we do is that if they are not under DIPP registered startups, uh, we suggest the companies to get it under the ITP registered startup and get those tax benefits as well. We review the relevant documents. We see the income tax things. We even go if there is any income tax notices that are there with the company. So how to deal with that? We suggest those accordingly. And for startups, there are also, as I said, there are also tax rebates, right? So we suggest what are the tax rebates that they can get, and if they have already taken any benefit, how they can get further benefits on it. So this is a taxation aspect of a financial due diligence. Now, from taxation, let's go ahead to the legal due diligence part. So in a legal due diligence part, there what we do is that there are various aspects. One being the secretarials, that is whether the secretarials are managed properly. We see whether the legalities are improper. So say for example, a person have got a notice from his supplier about defaulting, and for which they have started an IBC proceeding. If you recollect, before the pandemic, the operational creditor could have filed an IBC filing if you have missed a transaction of less than 1 lakh, right? If you have missed a transaction of a lakh, right? So, in case we see there is a IBC going ahead, then we strictly say to solve it before and then only go for the proposed transactions, because IBC is a very hassle job altogether. And so, this being the fact, there are various other things like agreements. So, when we go ahead with agreements, we see whether the agreements are proper. So again, taking this example forward, uh, in one of our due diligence assignment, we saw the employee agreement was not made in a proper way. Their term of employment expired much before, but the agreement persists and they did not renew the employment engagement. So this is one of the possibilities. Again, in legal parlance, if you know that in states like Hyderabad, in states like Mumbai, sexual harassment policy is mandatory for any business with employees more than 10 people. So if there are proceedings in this regard, wherein a person has taken cognizance of it, whether we see whether the company follows those rules or not, and if they have followed, what is the outcome of everything, so that we can uh, advise the investors about the potential risk of this transaction. So this being the legal part on it. Now coming to, as I said, there is whole lot of thing barring the technicalities involved. That is the technical due diligence, your financial due diligence, and legal due diligence. There is a very important part for IPR due diligence. In IPR due diligence, we try to find out whether the companies have applied for their IPR protection. So over here, if you see, we see whether the patent has been filed if it's a tech company and working on patentable products. We see whether the trademarks are protected. So this is very, very important. In many due diligence processes, we have seen the trademarks becoming a major hindrances, and wherein the investors have said the trademark has to be applied first, and then only the investors will invest. So the trademark comes from the fact the brand identity of the business. So until the brand identity is protected, investors are sometimes wary of investment. Second, being the negotiations. What are the things in IPR, the IPR asset? What is the value of IPR asset? We have seen in various IPR things like trademarks and copyrights, the ministry has sent some notices in regards to clarification or objection. So whether the IP lawyer has given a proper remark to it, have reverted to this objections, we go to those in detail and appraise the investor about the same. And also we see what is the competing benefit. So say for example, if I apply the startup apply for the IP, and that is a trademark of a brand, and we see there are various other trademarks with the same name, we try to analyze the business risks attached to it. So whether they have to change the brand name altogether, that has to be analyzed and informed accordingly. Coming to FEMA due diligence, this is very, very crucial, especially if you have foreign investors in your cap table. So there are two aspects to this. One is the FDI, that is when you file for when you get foreign investors involved, you have to file forms like FCGPR, FCTRS, whether you have filed those things, whether you have filled the entity user, business users, and file those stuff. We go through these forms in detail and then try to analyze. Again, from ODI's perspective, that is, if you have a subsidiary overseas entity, whether you have done your ODI and APR filing, that is a must to see. So, FEMA due diligence can be a deal breaker for many things. So very, very careful, because this is one of the most neglected part of a company. But it becomes very important because the RBI has strict rules if for someone who breaks it, right? So again, there are 15 CACB forms which is required for overseas payments.
I'd like to add one more thing over here, Shramik.
Sure, Rahul.
For all our listeners. So the FEMA compliance becomes all the more important if you are planning to raise funds from outside India. So if you are working with a foreign investor or a foreign VC firm, and if FEMA compliances are not in place as per the latest RBI processes, the RBI compliance for the latest round of investment is not possible till the time the backlog related to earlier filings or other non-compliances are not cleared. So if there are any non-compliances on this account, it can not only delay the whole due diligence process, but it can delay the whole investment cycle. And as Shramik rightly said, that it can be a deal breaker also if things do not get resolved quickly. And things in the FEMA department, in the RBI, the filings, they happen through a process. So it does take time for the compliances to happen. So the whole purpose of due diligence we are talking about is for the companies who are raising funds. So if you are raising funds and if there are gaps during the due diligence on this account, it can really delay the things and even break the deal.
Right, Rahul. So yes, so we have to be very careful while doing this FEMA compliance. Otherwise, we have a potential risk of the deal getting off, right? So now coming to the point of what are the steps involved in a due diligence process. The first being we try to understand the compliance concerns. What are the things that the investors want from this due diligence process, right? We define the corporate objective of the process. We try to gather information. We find a checklist which I will show you after the slide. We share a checklist of a due diligence of a report of the things that we require. We record the process once those documents are given. We go through those informations. We go through the details, and then validate it with the data. So, say for example, if someone sends me his financial report, we validate with the data that are already there in Ministry of Corporate Affairs site. And once we go through it and we see that both the things are in match, we conduct a risk assessment. We analyze it. We go through in one by one the steps involved, and then we establish the things that are required to be done. And along that, we review the process regularly. So say, for example, I need one more document. We get in touch with the startups. We get in touch with their consultants, get those documents, and then vet it accordingly. The idea is to provide a very holistic outlook of the business altogether. And then at last, we provide a due diligence report where we not only analyze the firm, we provide the suggestions both to the firm as well as to the investors. The investors will require whether to go ahead with the investment or what are the things that they should know before signing the term sheet. And for companies, we give the suggestion what are the things they should do so that they can avoid long-term hassles altogether. So let me show you a checklist. Uh, so just give me a minute. Let me show you a checklist. So this is a checklist that we share with the client. This is a exhaustive 16-page due diligence checklist where we try, if you go ahead and see what are the things that we're covering, we are trying to cover the legal parts, the structures, the subsidiaries, what is the incorporation, what are the things that are involved, what are the, whether they have done statutory register, and for everything we have reserved a comment. So, say for example, if they say they haven't allotted, they do not have a proper internal policy committee of the charter, or they do not have a direct chart on the corporate structure, they can comment on it, and based on that, we can put our analysis of this. So then we go ahead with the cap table structure, the structures that we talked in the beginning, right? The cap table, capitalization, shareholding structure, the agreements, the promoters agreements and stuff. There are financing and loan related agreements. So if the company has done any loan, has taken a loan from a director, whether they have made any agreement to that, or for example, to a bank, they have raised a debt round. So whether what is the things related to it. So loans and financing documents are very important. Then there are intercompany relations here. So, say for example, we are the investors is acquiring a holding company, right? So we try to understand the intercompany relation between the holding company and its subsequent subsidiaries. So that is one. Then accounting and tax records, we go through one by one, each and every things that are there. The last year financials, the last, what are the, if there is a deficiency, what are the things that they might have missed, the custom GST returns and stuff related to it. We go ahead with filing to find the regulatory filings and approvals, whether they have got the approval from the authorities to do those business. So, say for example, again, if a restaurant business is getting acquired or is it's getting investment, where we see whether the company has got a FSSAI license, right? So these things related to this are very important to understand the viability of the project. Again, there are agreements, other documents, agreements with the clients, agreements with their suppliers, with their dealers, distributors. So, say for example, if a startup is in the franchisee mode, we go ahead and vet all those franchisee documents and try to find out whether there are potential risks and legal hassles that can have in that can take place in the future, and we try to understand that, right? So litigations are very, very important nowadays, whether the company or for that matter, any of the promoters are into have been litigated upon, have received any litigation notices. So how the things are proceeding on that, and what are the business risks attached to this litigation. The assets, the properties. Again, taking the restaurant example further, whether the properties are on lease or whether the company owns those properties. These are the things we check thoroughly. IPR, so say in IPR, as I said, whether the IPR are filed properly, have they got any notices, what are the agreements, how the IPRs are protected. We analyze each and every part of it, right? And then we go ahead with whether the company has done insurance or not. These are not typically for seed fund startups, but again, when things develop, when we work with CDCA fundraise, these things are important in regards to insurance, environmental compliance, and stuff related to it. Employee labor compliance is very, very important, whether the companies have done their proper PF, PSI filings, pre-tax filing for companies based in Mumbai, West Bengal, whether they have done all those filings properly, whether they have filed those returns, and whether the NDAs and stuff are all based properly or not. So these are the things that are very, very important to analyze. Now coming to the director's part, the director's part has has recently got very important because previously not thorough due diligence was done. But then in 2016 or 17, when the ministry came up with a notification of disqualifying the directors who have not filed their returns in other companies, we now we do a thorough check of the director's background, whether they are disqualified and what is the period of disqualification, and whether they have filed all their necessary returns, because the directors are the main part of the business. If they do not do, if we do not do a proper due diligence of the directors, then the entire investment might get jeopardized. So these are the things that are done in a very minute way, so that the real picture comes out of it. So let me go back to the slide.
So, Swamik, this is a very detailed and comprehensive checklist. So, what I understand from this is that so the first, the major aspects, the all tax and regulatory compliances, legal compliances which are applicable, be it direct and indirect taxes, be it labor laws, be it corporate law compliances, RBI and FEMA compliances. So accounting, how the records are maintained, how supporting documents are maintained. So anything related to finance, tax, accounts is something which is checked in detail in due diligence. Apart from it, the overall background of the company, overall background of the directors, their presence in the social media, their statutory score, we can call it a statutory score, that how they have complied with other things. So compliance is something which we focus on. And apart from that, what kind of agreements the company has with the employees, with the directors, with different vendors, different customers, what kind of projects they have, what kind of expense commitments they have, what kind of liabilities they have undertaken, what kind of litigations they are undergoing. So all these things are something which are checked in very detail in due diligence. And also like for our listeners here, uh, the the list which we have shared today is a standard list, but usually the investors and the due diligence team, they have a curated list depending upon the kind and nature of business your company is into. So before doing the due diligence, there is a detailed call with the investors and with the founders. They understand the business, the kind of things they are doing, the kind of entity they are having, and basis that a specific list is curated and shared. And even after the first list is shared, further follow-up questions, further follow-up details are asked based on the review of the initial list during the due diligence process. So it's mostly curated list depending upon your nature of business.
Right, right, absolutely. So we speak to the investors, talk to them. As I said, we try to understand their concerns, compliance concerns. And based on that, we prepare a checklist and forward it to the startup. Uh, so let's go to the next part. Uh, so the due diligence report, when we give a due diligence report, we give what are the things that we have studied, what are the backgrounds of the supporting documents, what are the facts, the findings. We do a SWOT analysis. Try to find the details about what are the key points. And also we try to understand give some suggestions about what are the things that needs to be done. Now, the key aspects of a due diligence reports are these four things. Uh, these are hardcore technical terms, and we will try to explain in an easier way. deal breakers are things that we find that is very uh, very problematic in both in the short and long term, and it cannot be rectified. It has a huge implications of the business, and it will create a long term as well as short term hassles for the investors and its investment. So these are the things that are very critical in nature and should be highlighted in our report. So these are the deal breakers. There are deal diluters. So again, taking for example, if you have done something wrong, right, and you there is a potential of getting it a notice of is very high and a penalty is very high, the valuation of the thing will decrease. Take for example, your brand that you are operating for the last 2 years are already are already trademarked by someone else. So that would be a potential deal diluter. The valuation that you're offering this investment will get reduced. There are deal cautioners, that is things, say for example, you have done a wrong filing in regards to sexual harassment, right? So in your SHA, what will happen is that there are some preconditions which has to be rectified first, and then once it is rectified, the investment will take place. So these are deal cautioners, and there are at large the deal makers. Things, if things are good, say they are compliant in finance, they are compliant in legalities, they are compliant in secretarials, they are compliant in IPR, RBI related stuff. Then these things are deal makers. We put in our report that we should go ahead with a deal. In each of these aspects, we suggest our opinion. So say if the IPR is totally protected, then that can be a deal maker in overall perspective altogether. So these are the things that needs to be answered, addressed, and properly executed, so that we get a total holistic outlook of the entire process. Once done, we suggest, as I said already, we speak to the investors, we give our input, and we also give a suggestion to the company, so that there is this creates a win-win scenario where both the investors and the company benefit. So Rahul, if you can add any point if you have.
Soumik, I think what you have said is very correct, and so adding to what we were discussing earlier, one is that the due diligence checklist, the way the due diligence is conducted, the the depth of inquiries in the due diligence process depends upon various things. The amount of investment the investor is looking to do is a major criteria. So a due diligence conducted at an angel investment level is is much simple as compared to a due diligence which is conducted at a Series B or Series C level. However, at an angel level, the due diligence happens for the first time. When the investment happens at Series A, Series B, Series C level, the company has already matured to a certain level, and after that, uh, and they have a set team of finance. They have a set finance team. They have a team of professionals who handle things for them. So larger companies, they face lesser problem. Even though at the angel level, the due diligence may not be very stringent, but it becomes very important, especially for the companies and startups who are trying to raise the angel fund, because that is the first entry point. When you get the tag and the brand name of investors investing in your company, the first cracking the first deal is most important, and then the things comparatively get easier. So being prepared for the first round of investment and cracking the first due diligence set of due diligence is something which is very important, and that is what we should look forward to and be prepared for. And apart from that, it's not only about due diligence. Tax, accounts, finance, law is something we should always be on the right side, because anyway the government, the statutory authorities, they have a lot of provisions related to interest, penalties, prosecutions. So to buy peace of mind, to have peace of mind, focus on your business, to be in compliance is something which is a prerequisite and very, very primary requirement. We come across many young entrepreneurs who plan and budget for everything in their business plan, but not for finance and accounts. Or even if they do it, the quantum is not that high. So quantum may vary depending upon your size and scale of business, but this is something which is very important. Whether you go for due diligence or not, is irrespective. Irrespective of that, that is something which has to be done. So I think, yeah, that is from our side. We'll take some questions now. So we have question from Vaibhav, and Vaibhav says that we are in process of setting up a ESOP pool. What are the proper standards to follow? And how much would it affect if a similar trademark has been registered by some other company, but ours was registered long time back? So, so Vaibhav, ESOP, when we are talking about ESOP pool, ESOP pool is related to a proper ESOP plan. So there is a ESOP plan, there is a filing required with the ROC, there is ESOP related agreements which has to be done with the employees. So just creation and setup of a ESOP pool is different from floating the complete ESOP plan. So maybe I'll allow you to talk, so that maybe you can let us know your question in more detail. That are you only talking about ESOP, creation of ESOP pool, or are you talking about setting up of a ESOP plan? So allowed you to talk, Vaibhav.
Yes, hi Rahul. Thank you. What we were trying to do is we were trying to set us up for getting funded, and we found that there is a requirement of an ESOP pool before actually funding can be done, because the investors do not like to get diluted on ESOP pools. And we want a plan for that also, but right now our team is not so diverse that a plan we can make and keep with us, but I don't think so we could be able to execute it for the next 6 months at least.
I get your question, Vaibhav. So this is something which many startups, they have this query and this confusion. So creation of ESOP pool per se does not, that is a virtual thing. So in your cap table, you can create a certain percentage as ESOP pool, which is not actually allotted to anybody. And but there is a provision in the cap table for the ESOP, and there is a pre-ESOP and post-ESOP diluted shareholding. So which gives a clear understanding to the potential investor that after the ESOP pool, how does the cap table looks like. So that can be created even without a ESOP plan being in place. And coming to your next question, so there's one more question which you have asked is, how much would it affect if a similar trademark has been registered by some other company, but ours was registered a long time back? Shramik, would you like to attempt this question?
Right. So, Vaibhav, when you go for trademark registration, of course, just tell me one thing: is your trademark already registered, or it is being filed?
Yeah, it is registered.
Right. So if it's already been registered, then there is no issue in your side. You can apply to the authorities, or you can send notices to this startup about to stop using your trademark if it is same, or else you can directly apply to the IPR authorities, putting the objections to him about the issue.
Okay, Soumik. I also wanted to know whether if we don't go for the objection right now, and if they get that trademark registered, What would be the options for us after that?
So I
Then
think, Vaibhav, we can discuss the specifics offline.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Thanks.
so this in this webinar, we are focusing on the due diligence aspects. So
Yes.
specific things, I think we can connect offline. We'll share our email ID. So it's info@taxmantra.com. You can write to us, and we'll share the contact details. So I would suggest that we'll take it up one on one the specific questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Vaibhav. Do we have any other questions?
I think, Rahul, I have received some personal things from clients. One is how much time the entire process takes. So this is again a very common question. The DD process might take anywhere around 2 weeks to a month, and based on those our reports, the entire thing gets concluded. The second question that I received is how much can this be done virtually, or the DD officers directly come to our offices and visit the premises and do the due diligence. So, uh, sort of this type of due diligence depends. It depends on the type of the quantum of due diligence, the what are the things that are related. If the entire business is seed fund and the things are going online, and if the companies can share with us the documents in person over emails and over Google Drive, then we can go to it and vet it accordingly. However, if the investors want to do a thorough due diligence where we need to visit their offices, then that's a second thing that can be done. But this is usually done when a merger and amalgamation takes place or a Series A funding takes place, right? So these are the two questions, Rahul, that I received. So what do you, if you have any?
Okay. So I don't think we have any further questions on due diligence. So, Swamik, if you can share the contact details slide.
Sure.
So, thank you, Shramik, for the detailed presentation, for the detailed checklist. And I would like to thank everyone who has joined us in this webinar. So you can reach out to us through our website, www.taxmantra.com, and you can write to us info@taxmantra.com. We have this toll-free number also on which you can reach out to us.
So you can take a screenshot, guys, of the same, and you can reach out to us, and within 24 hours, we will get this.
Thank you, everyone, once again for joining. Thank you, Swamik.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Stay safe.